Hey, welcome back. Today I made a photo and a print. Good morning, everybody. Decided to come out here to Whitman Mission National Historic Site. One of my favorite places to photograph. It's quite close to home. And, ooh, I've got some deer out there. Yeah, about 10 miles or less from home. And a nice frozen morning. I was out here yesterday and was just taking a walk with the dog and decided, I really need to get out and take a look and make an image here as the season is turning. We have our first freeze, our first frost this weekend, and it's just a lot of gorgeous stuff out here. So the goal, certainly, make at least one image that is going to be really good, hopefully. And of course, I'm all about, I want to make this big print. You've already seen me say, hey, here's the print, here's the photo we're going to make today. And I don't know what that is just yet. I'm just starting my trek. So let's take a quick look at what the landscape is offering us today. It wasn't necessarily my purpose, my point to get the color of sunrise, and as we can see, there's virtually zero clouds in the sky. So I might get some really cool light as it rakes across the land first, as it pops up over those hills in the distance. But this is all about these grasses, possibly this fence up here. This is the Oregon Trail that went through here, and so we've got this fence along these ruts in the Oregon Trail. And where I'm really intending to go is this area that is along the perimeter. And so there's this perimeter trail that will get me some really cool grasses and really cool, way more natural feel. All this stuff is fairly manicured. And so I'm going to be walking through the apple orchard here shortly. Very small little orchard they have. And I'll be able to get out there into the more natural area. Alright, I made it to this perimeter area just at the very beginning of it, and it's time to kind of shift gears, as it were, and really focus in, try and hunt for that image. Now, when I was here yesterday, it wasn't until I started turning, to the east, where I really started seeing things I really thought I would enjoy shooting. But the frost is here. The grasses have just this little bit of frost on them. It's gorgeous. And as we get over yonder further, I can also get out to the Walla Walla River. And so that's going to be kind of cool to maybe get some of those. I don't know. We will just have to wait and see what I find. So the next time you see me, I'll be at my image that I found. got a bunch of grass right here. And the thing that's intriguing me is the loops that are made. And I got just a whole bunch of them. And I think I can just zoom in and isolate. So I'm going to try that for my first shot today. Yeah, I think that has some promise. So we will try and get this one going. So I came on these grasses 20 minutes ago or so. The sun starts coming up and these clouds are just starting to really become present. It's interesting to see how it all comes together. But what I'm focusing on right now is the sun coming up behind these frost-covered grasses, and I'm kind of just getting closer and closer. And as I do so, certainly I'm emphasizing. Oh, now we're getting a little bit of wind coming too. I had no wind until just now, but trying to emphasize some of those forms, straight lines, and then these curved lines, all with the warmth of the sun coming up behind it. And then it also has an upward angle because I keep getting lower and lower as the sun increases its height in the sky. And so I'm getting this lower and lower angle, which I think is kind of cool. I think it's coming together all right. But what's really working on this image is that stark contrast, I think. The ice of the frost and then the warmth of the sun behind. I also experimented with some of the focus stacking ideas, and there's a lot to go on that we're going to cover in post-production, but I haven't moved since I parked it here, and there's just been a lot of good things. So hopefully I can get some stuff that's still going to work, even though I've got the tiniest of breezes coming through now. I'm at about in the neighborhood of 85 millimeters. Sometimes I'm a little zoomed in, sometimes I'm a little less than that. So hovering about 85 millimeters to really just throw that background color out of focus, so it's just a nice warmth of presence, and then contrasting that, of course, with the cool tones that are there in the ice crystals, or the coolness that comes through, maybe I should say, in those ice crystals. Yeah, I think the shot is done with the wind that's coming, and then as I've gotten closer, I'm emphasizing, of course, the distance between these grasses as well. When I was a little bit further back, that distance between them is not as emphasized, so it's easier to get them all in focus. And I did like having at least this bunch in focus, whereas the background progressively gets out of focus. Alright, I'm going to go and hunt for a couple more images. As I'm looking about, I'm starting to think either macro is going to be my jam, or maybe I'm going to be looking for some in-camera movement. There's, I think, a lot of opportunity to play with the really soft tones that are coming through, or that can come through here. So doing some in-camera movement could be really cool as well. I'm about freezing my fingers off, so I decided to pause here in the leaves as I look for an image and trying to warm up a little bit in my pockets. What I'm really intrigued by is the grass that's coming out of the leaves, and then of course the nice softness that the frost on the leaves provides. We also have some of these logs, twigs, branches, whatever you want to call them, that I might be able to compose as well. Lots of good stuff here that would probably make a really good macro shot. I just have to find the shot that is gonna speak to me, as it were. So yeah, we'll see. I'll spend a few moments here. I'll see what I can find and get some images made here. Well, I've walked all around this place, and the most interesting part to me is right there where those grasses are coming out. And so I'm going to go ahead and get a few shots. And my video camera battery is pretty much dead, so I will just pick it up in the studio as we go through post-production and finally get these things out to print. All right, so here we are in the studio and taking a look now at all these pictures that I made today. I've gone through a lot of the processing already, and I just want to give you a highlight, and I've chosen one that I'm going to actually take and print today as well. So we will go through that process in detail. But as far as what these others are, let's just take a look and see what we have here in Lightroom. You'll see that I have several of these groupings, these items where we can collapse it down. I love this feature that Lightroom has. When I go up here to Photo, and then I go to Stacking, and then I can auto stack by capture time. When I do that, I decided to choose 15 seconds as my gap between stacks, because sometimes I was pretty quick when I was doing my various images, whatever I was doing. But when the camera does its autofocus adjustment, its autofocus bracketing is what it calls it, those happen really fast. So when I did that, I was able to tell it, I hit cancel here, but I just didn't want it to reprocess. But anyway, it was able to capture these 5, and that's what I told it to do. I said on the camera, I want you to get 5 images. And then, of course, there's some time it takes for me to go to the next set. And then I increased it to 15. Then I decreased it to 10, as you can see. So I was just going through and experimenting with these things. And it has auto-stacked them now so that I can very easily discern exactly what part of the process I was in. And then it also takes those that are focus stacked and it just joins them together. And so it's really easy to find which one I'm looking for, which set of images I'm looking for. And I don't have to just determine, oh, was it this one or this one as the ending and the starting point of this set. All right, so for this focus stack here, let's say, I can go through and you can see how it looks like, oh, here's another stack starting at 5. There we go. And it just kind of gets a little bit in focus versus if I were to have done 50 images, it would have gotten a lot in focus. But anyway, I have decided to work on those a little bit later, so I'm going to collapse those and not worry about them any further here. I also grabbed some images that I have, as you can see, since rejected. And really the biggest reason I decided to reject these images, I didn't care for the exact focus point. Basically this piece here, it's a prominent element. It's actually not in focus, so that was a mistake. Otherwise, I like this composition. I think it's pretty sweet. But with that thing not being in focus, and I did not do a focus stack here, it just wasn't going to work out. So I was like, nope, not going to even waste my time on it. Now on this framing, it looks like it's still a little bit soft, but I haven't rejected these, so let's see what's going on here. Did I focus stack that? No, so I'll probably reject those as well. What I did end up keeping, one of my favorite ones here of the day, is this one, and then I've got this one here though. This one's even better. See if you can pick out the difference. Besides a little bit brighter. So I processed it exactly the same. It's just the sun is a little bit higher, so I'm getting a little more light coming through. But the biggest difference is off way to the right-hand side. Check a look at those twigs, pieces of grass. Yeah, we got to get rid of those. So I just went over and bent it to the side a little bit. I didn't break the grass or nothing. I just kind of moved it to the side since it was just needing a little bit of encouragement to get out of the way. And then this is going to be the one I think I'm going to print. I like this print. It is about this image. It's about the subtlety of these cool hues and the warm hues, the wonderful idea of the ice crystals coming through. It's definitely really cool. I really like that. All right, this image very similar, but this one I actually used a split neutral density on this framing. So we can take a look at the difference there between that and that. And I just like this one a little bit more brighter, a little bit airier here. But did a little bit of in-camera movement. I really liked how that came out. And this was handheld and just kind of experimenting a little bit with a lot of these things. You can see I've rejected a whole bunch of these in-camera movements that I did. So I'm not going to even worry about showing you. And then here's another one that I did of 25 frames. So here's the stack where mostly everything is in focus. I chose up here especially, these are a little bit soft. I didn't want us to pay attention to those. Possibly we get a few things out here in the far reaches a little bit soft as well. But what my goal was this little leaf. And then I decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and do a focus stack. So I set up the autofocus adjustment item that the camera has. And I just went and grabbed 25 images, 25 frames. And then, of course, this is stacked here. So here's my favorite frame of the non-stacked version. Now, I am using f11, so I'm getting a fair amount of depth of field already. And so a lot of things are in focus. And as I zoom in, my intent was to get this nice and sharp, that little ridge right there. And then, of course, whatever else comes in nice and sharp comes in as well. But with this being full on in focus, this could make a really interesting print too. So I might end up doing this one instead. I'm still a little bit, yeah, we'll see. And then I liked this one too, also a focus stack, 25 images. And I had a couple different framings. This first set of framings, the lighting was really overcast, and so you can see it's just a little bit flatter to begin with. Now this is not focus stacked. But then we go with this focus stacked item. You can see there's a little bit of contrast coming through with the lighting. And then this last one where I expanded it to 30 frames, we just had a full-on sun. And I was just like, nope, that's not even worth it. So I'm not going to do that. So this would make a good print too, I think. Focusing in on my intent, focusing in on this leaf and, of course, the interaction it has with all these other items. But let's go ahead. I'm just going to stick to my original plan. And I'm going to make this one the final print. And I think this is, I had said something in the field too. So I think this is coming to it. This is kind of coming to fruition, as it were. So that's pretty sweet. Let's take a quick gander at the developing that I did make on this image. So actually nothing in the vibrance or saturation. I mean, this came out, I am using the profile landscape, which is already fairly saturated. So usually I don't have to do too much in the vibrance or saturation on that. A bit of clarity, bringing out a little bit of clarity. Tone down the whites a little bit, boost those shadows, and then tone down the highlights a little bit. But take a look at my masks, using a lot of masks. Now these are just brush masks and then 2 gradient masks. So let's take a look at these from where I started. So the central highlights, basically, I was wanting to just really target and bring out some of that detail. So what I decided to do there was just give the whites a little bit of a bump, and then my texture and clarity just in that central framing region. So nothing too fantastic, just a little bit of nudge here and there. A little bit of outer vignette, so just a custom vignette to tone down some of these regions on the edges of the frame. And then this sun area, here I wanted to really reduce the clarity and texture, and I even took my sharpness down. I wanted that to just feel a little more, just that creamy feel, that out of focus, blurry bokeh type feel. And so these settings are going to help accomplish that. And then the sun only, take a look at this. The only thing I did here, I added a little bit of color. And the reason I wanted to do that is, quite frankly, it was blown out and I wanted a little bit of color brought in. But this goes hand in hand with something else. So tuck this away for just a little bit. We'll come back. We'll cycle back to this. Lower gradient here. So here, just bumping the exposure just ever so slightly to help it match the top a little bit. And then on this, taking it down just ever so slightly to help even it out just a little bit and make it feel a little more cohesive throughout. Now let's go talk about that item that I said we would cycle back. To get a little bit of color in there, I went and did this tone curve, and I chose a value of an input of 255, which is pure white, and an output of 250. By doing that, I brought down the brightest tone ever that could ever be possible in this image to a 250 value. That means when I print it, there will always be ink everywhere. There's no chance that this can clip out in the histogram, and we can see what's happening up here. That histogram slams up and then just falls off. And so by doing this, that actually brought in a little bit of color into that region. And this is something that I frequently do in Photoshop, but now I don't need to worry about even doing that technique in Photoshop. I can just make it happen here. All right, so when I start to print, I do like to go to Photoshop. I've got, of course, the print function here, the print module here, and it does fine results. And if you wanted to use that just as a proof of concept or something like that, certainly this is a good way to go about that, and that's fine. But I'm going to show you my Photoshop technique and what I do in Photoshop to get the prints going. I have an Epson 9900, and so that's a 44-inch wide machine. You can probably hear it as it's firing up now. And I'm only going to print this 24 inches wide, or actually about 22 inches wide, 20 inches wide, somewhere in there. So whatever tall by about 20 to 22 inches wide. And I just like to take it straight into Photoshop. So I'm going to just take this and I will say edit in, and we're going to go straight into Photoshop. And I'm going to do I want to do the 2020? I thought I had the 2022 version. We'll go ahead and try the 2023 version. I did have some crashes coming on that a little bit ago, but it appears to be running. I just need to get out of... All right, so here we are in Photoshop, and let's go ahead. Where did it go? It went bye-bye. There it goes. See, it crashed on me once again. Okay, we're finally in business in Photoshop 2022. The 2023 version is still crashing on me sometimes. So here we are. Let's get rid of the timeline item. And so what I like to do when I print, and the reason I like to print from Photoshop is I get so much control in Photoshop, which if I had a RIP software, I could certainly get a lot of control in my RIP software too, but I don't have a RIP software. And I like to control my sharpening settings like mad, basically, and how, boy howdy. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to size this to go ahead and be in the neighborhood here. For my width, I'm going to go ahead and do 22 inches. And for my height, I'm just going to let it be whatever it is. And so 14.6, that's fine. I'm not going to get picky otherwise about that. And so I'm going to tell this to do automatic. I had done the preserved details previously on something, but usually I just leave it at automatic. And you can see here, I am definitely downsizing this image. So I've got 45 megapixels in this camera, and I'm downsizing it here, and that's just going to be amazing. I've got lots of detail to deal with. But I decided to do 240 because that's usually what I end up printing. I could have certainly done 300. Not a big deal either way. But the reason it's not a big deal either way, and the reason I'm picky on my resolution is I like my resolution to be an even multiplier of the physical dots per inch that's on my printer itself. And so when we take a look, the physical is 1440, and when I divide that by 240, we get an even multiplier of 6. So that's great. There's virtually, I mean, it's really easy math for the computer to take care of, and I get really fine results when I'm being really picky on my sharpening settings, which we're going to do now. So I'm going to convert this to Smart Object first. The reason I like to do this is so when I do a filter, I am able to come back to it and reset it any way I want. And so I'm going to go down here to Sharpen, and I'm going to use Smart Sharpen. I can, and I'm used to using Unsharp Mask, but Smart Sharpen does a really good job. It's really, really similar to Unsharp Mask, but you get this massive preview, which is amazing. Unsharp Mask does not give that to you. And yeah, these items are perfect to make my judgment on for my sharpening. Okay, my amount, that is going to be whatever you want it to be, how strong you want it to be. So we'll come back to that actually. My radius, I like to have it as a starting point, 1/2 of 1% of my image resolution. All right, so my image resolution is 240. 1% of that is 2.4. So 1/2 of that would be 1.2. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to go a little bit stronger than that. So I'm going to go 1.5. And then my reduced noise, then this is going to be anywhere between 9 and 12 is probably where I want to be. And so I'll go ahead and play with 9, but let's go ahead really quickly. What would happen if I were to do 1? Did you see how that just really sharpened quite a bit? But also take a look at all the noise that's coming through in here. And if I were to do like a 12, so this is very much like a threshold in the Unsharp Mask. And what threshold is it determines what an edge is by saying we need this amount of difference in our tonal values from pixel to pixel. And when we have a high contrast, so like a level 12 or whatever, we're going to call that an edge, and that's what we're going to sharpen. Well, the reduced noise is similar to that. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar to that. And so at least I treat it similarly. So anywhere in the 10 to 12 range, 9 to 12 range, usually goes really well. Now in this image, these shadows and highlights, I actually don't need to worry about. So yeah, I just hit that. It turns them all off. The benefit that this has really comes through when you have an image that you need to modify the sharpening settings you have in your shadows areas or your highlight areas. Do you pull it back a little bit, or do you leave it full force in those areas? In this image, it's being that it's fairly low contrast, so I'm just going to hit OK here really quick. So by fairly low contrast, I mean there's not a whole lot of distribution in that histogram. Take a look at around roughly 60% dark, it just peters out. And then certainly I've got minuscule amounts of darker values, but as far as the main presence of this image, this is where it's all at. And so it's going to be a nice, bright, and vibrant image for sure. And then I could certainly take a look at this. Let's see, at 100%, if I wanted to preview other areas here. I could have done it in the filter dialog box, or I can just do it here and take a look at it. And I can turn off and on that filter. This is a great benefit of using the smart filters and converting that to a smart object first. But that's showing up really nice. It's just barely present, and that's showing up really nice with those sharpening settings. And when you're in Lightroom and you're using the print module in Lightroom, your sharpening settings are low, medium, and high, and you really have no idea exactly what those mean. And I like to be able to preview my sharpening settings, and I like to be able to be super dialed in as far as saying, hey, you know what, when I get my initial printout, if I don't like it, if I want to change something, then I know exactly what I can do. I can increase this amount, increase or decrease either of these amounts, and I'll have different things happening as I'm going through my sharpening process to get the right picture, the right print that I'm needing, that I want. All right, that's it. It's time to print. Now, certainly I could think about getting some kind of soft proofing going on and the like, but again, this is an image that is a fairly muted color palette. Everything is just going to work really well, I'm sure. I have a high level of confidence in it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit print and get this thing going. All right, so my biggest thing, of course, I am on a 24 by 32 inch paper size. I definitely need to change that. So let's go ahead and hit our print settings. And that was a little over 14 inches tall. So I need a 22 by about 16 is going to be where I want to be. So I'm going to do manage custom sizes. You can see I've got a lot here. Just a lot of different custom things going on. Okay, 24 by 16 is what we'll call it. And then I have to, of course, plug in my items here, 24 by 16, and then I usually just zero these out, and I hit OK. And so now it's 24 by 16. Then I have to go down to Layout, and go down to Printer Settings, and I am on the Epson 9900. Hugely, hugely important to make sure we got that right. All right, so definitely I'm doing roll paper. And then the paper I have in there now is Premium Luster Photo Paper 260. And then I'm going to leave these guys the same. That's all good. This is my really basic, just proof of concept paper. It's fairly affordable, and if I like what I see, then I'm going to go ahead and say, yep, I'm going to put this on the more expensive paper. Now, as I have more practice with a particular image or a series of images, certainly I would feel comfortable going straight to the more expensive paper, but this is really just a proof of concept type idea. I don't want to go hog wild with just major expensive type papers. All right, so it will look like that when it's all done. So let's get this going. Oh, two more things we need to look at. Three more things we need to look at. Oh my goodness. That is my color handling. I am definitely a believer in letting Photoshop manage the colors. If you want your nice, nuanced, perfect control of your color, let Photoshop do that for you. And then I just need to go and make sure I select the proper profile. If I get the wrong profile, the wrong color is going to come out. But I've got the profiles for the 9900 loaded, and so of course I choose the exact same item here. Now, given that this is an Epson paper, quite frankly, there's going to be no difference. If you were to say let the printer manage the colors, and of course if you select that right paper, it's going to be able to pick up automatically that profile. But if I'm on a special paper that Epson doesn't support or Epson didn't manufacture, then I need to do this process so that I can get the right color profile going, and Photoshop then controls that. So yes, as an Epson paper that I'm doing, no, there's really not that big of a deal, not that big of a difference. But I'm just in this habit, and I want to teach this idea of let's let Photoshop manage these items for us. Now I am also noticing actually it just because of the way I did the exporting of the file, it is Adobe RGB. I do usually have it in ProPhoto. On this image, there's going to be no difference though, because again, there's nothing that is pushing the boundaries of these colors. They are going to all be within gamut, and we're going to be just fine. All right, so I'm going to hit the print button, and then I'm going to rotate the camera here so we can see it going and get this print out. This will be amazing. It may be hard to see, but the print head certainly going. It's going to drop down here in just a little bit. This really is a nice machine. So glad to have it, and I've recently added it to the office here, and it's just fantastic to have a machine like this. The old Canon, I've got a Pro 10, Pixma Pro 10 over there. It hasn't printed much at all. I need to get it going again so that I can not let it get clogged. That would be a bad thing. There, I turned on another light for us so we can hopefully see this a little easier. Initially, as I'm looking at the very top edge of the image that's coming out, I'm very pleased with what I see. The tones and the brightness values are exactly where I expected them to be. Certainly they'll look a little brighter once I get them in the full light. And then when it's done printing, it will cut it automatically, and that'll be that. It'll be finished. All right, there we go. Made myself a nice photograph today. So I photographed it this morning at around roughly 6 o'clock in the morning, and here I am in the evening, 12 hours later or so, a little more than 12 hours. Nice big print. Man, definitely spoiled. All right, let's take a quick look in Photoshop and make sure that those tones came in the way I was wanting them to come in. The biggest thing I'm just curious about is to double check that thing I did in Lightroom where these colors need to have some tonality. So let's grab the eyedropper. Let's take a quick look here and see what these colors are, because these colors need to not be pure white, and pure white of course is 255. So here we have it, 250 straight across. So that's good. This is exactly what I expected it to be. And the thing is, when I looked at the print, I can tell when I get that angle going on, because it's a pigment-based printer, I can kind of see a little bit of metamerism going on. There's a little bit where it kind of gives way that says, hey, this is an area where there's just a lot less ink coming on, but at least there is ink still coming on it. So it worked out. It did exactly what I wanted or expected it to do. Certainly I could tone that down even more or put more color in it even more. Whatever I want to do with that is just fine. But for now, I'm going to leave it. Again, this is a proof of concept type thing, and I'm just thrilled to have it there. That would be something certainly I would put on my wall, and it is just part of the creative process, part of making art that, well, certainly I want to be proud of it, but part of making art that really is honed in and speaking to the things that I want it to do. It does what I would need it to do, and this is a process. And so when I revisit this idea down the road, if someone were to order this as a print, or if I were to give it as a gift, this is just knowledge that goes into that final print making process that says, oh, this is what happened initially. There we go. Let's make sure we fine tune it and get it just perfectly dialed in. And this way for me is something that is a much easier process to get it dialed in, rather than just fretting and going over and over in Photoshop and in Lightroom. Go ahead and just get a print out. Maybe you want to do a smaller print. That totally makes sense. But maybe you just want to get a print out and get a sense for it, and then make your refinements, make your adjustments, and then go forward again. And it's going to be just getting dialed in and getting perfect. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for joining me out there on the trail and here in the studio as we make some images and get a fantastic print going. Until next time, happy shooting.